The coffee had gone cold again. I noticed it the same way. I noticed most things those days. Too late, after the fact, when there was nothing left to do about it. I wrapped both hands around the mug anyway and stood at the kitchen window, watching the October light do its slow, reluctant thing across the backyard. The maple had finally given up. Every last leaf was down, plastered flat against the wet grass, and the sky above the fence line had that particular shade of gray that Canadians know means the good months are finished. Pack it up, settle in, endure. My daughter was upstairs getting ready for school, which meant I had approximately 4 minutes before the chaos started. 4 minutes of quiet. I tried to use them. The hydro bill was on the counter. I'd turned it face down 2 days ago so I wouldn't have to look at the number. But I knew the number. I knew it the same way. I knew the exact balance in my checking account, the way I knew which floorboard creaked by the bathroom, so I could step over it at 6 in the morning without waking her. You memorize the things that matter when the margin for error disappears. Her name was Juniper, but she'd been Junie since she was about 3 days old, and the name Juniper had struck both of us, me and my mother, as far too grand for something that's small and furious. She was 8 now. She had her father's dark eyes and my stubbornness, and a laugh that made strangers turn around in grocery stores. She was the best thing I had ever done, and also, if I was being honest with myself in the 4 quiet minutes I was allotted each morning, the reason I hadn't fallen apart completely. I picked up the hydro bill, flipped it over. Right, okay. I put it back face down. My name is Claire. I'm 31 years old. I work as a medical office administrator at a family health clinic in Kitchener, Ontario, which is the kind of job that sounds stable until you realize the dental isn't included and the parking costs $12 a day. I'd been doing it for 4 years, since I'd moved back from Toronto after Junie's dad made it clear that his definition of co-parenting was more of a philosophical concept than an actual practice. My mom was here. My sister was an hour away in Guelph. The rent was cheaper. Those were the calculations that brought me back, and I'd made peace with them, mostly. What I hadn't made peace with, not entirely, was the specific texture of a life where you are always almost fine, almost caught up, almost ahead. The kind of life where a $200 car repair becomes a genuine crisis, and you spend 3 days quietly doing math in your head before you fall asleep. That was October. The first cold snap, the dead maple, the face-down hydro bill. That was the month he walked back into it. The clinic where I worked shared a building with a physiotherapy practice and a walk-in. We were on the 2nd floor. The waiting room smelled like hand sanitizer and old magazines, and the carpet had a pattern that I think was intended to be calming, but had always looked to me like something you'd find in a Winnipeg casino. I'd rearranged the chairs twice in 4 years. That was the extent of my authority. I was at the front desk on a Thursday afternoon, working through a backlog of referral forms, when the door opened. I didn't look up immediately. You learn not to, in that job. You develop a kind of professional peripheral awareness. You register that someone has entered. You track them in your side vision until you've finished the sentence you're typing. And then you look up with the expression that says I've been expecting you specifically, even when you absolutely have not. So I finished the sentence, and then I looked up. And the referral form I was holding slid out of my hand and hit the floor without me noticing. He was taller than I remembered. That was the first absurd thought I had. He's taller, as though 8 years had added a few inches along with everything else. He was wearing a dark coat, expensive looking, the kind with a collar that sat just right, and he had a small leather bag over one shoulder that probably cost more than my monthly take-home. His hair was shorter. His jaw was sharper. He looked like someone had taken the boy I used to know and pressed him into a harder shape, like a stone that's been in a river long enough to lose its rough edges. He was looking at his phone. He hadn't seen me yet. I had exactly 3 seconds. I used them to do absolutely nothing useful. "Hi there," I said. My voice came out normally. I was unreasonably proud of this. He looked up. The moment he recognized me, something moved across his face. Not shock exactly. More like a man who has dropped something and is watching it fall, and hasn't yet decided whether to reach for it. Then it was gone, smoothed over, and he was just looking at me with those gray-green eyes that I had spent a significant portion of my early 20s trying to forget. Claire, he said. Not a question. Just my name. The way you say a word you haven't said out loud in a long time to see if you still know how. Everett, I said. His last name was Calloway. Everett Calloway. We'd met in our second year at Waterloo. I was in health studies. He was in systems design engineering, which meant we had no business being in the same orbit, except that we both went to the same Wednesday night pub trivia, and were both, it turned out, unreasonably competitive about it. He knew everything about infrastructure and early Canadian hockey history. I knew everything about biology and film. Together, we were nearly unstoppable. We dated for 2 years. I have not used the word love yet because I am trying to be precise about this. And the truth is that what I felt for Everett Calloway was not the soft, manageable kind of love that you can fold up and put away when it's over. It was the kind that got into the architecture of you, the kind that, 8 years later, made your voice come out normally when you were actually anything but. He left at 24. A job offer in Vancouver, then Singapore, then apparently somewhere else, and somewhere else after that. He'd told me he had to go, that this was his shot, that he'd figure out a way to make it work between us. And I'd believed him for about 4 months before. The calls got shorter, and the silences got longer, and eventually I understood that what he'd meant was that he'd figure out a way to make his life work, and I was a detail he hadn't managed to factor in. I didn't hate him for it. I want to be clear about that. I was 24. I cried for a long time, in ways I hid from my roommates, and then I rebuilt myself around the gap, and then I met Junie's father, and then that whole other thing happened. And by the time I moved back to Kitchener, I had enough current disasters to keep me occupied without revisiting old ones. That was the story I told myself. Here is what I had not accounted for. The way he would look standing in my waiting room at 32, with his expensive coat and his careful face, saying my name like he was checking that it still fit. "Are you a patient here?" I asked. Because I was a professional, because this was my job. "Walk in," he said. I didn't realize, I just moved back. Temporarily. 6 months, maybe more. I don't have a GP set up yet. "The walk-in is on the ground floor," I said. "A beat." "Right," he said. I went to 2 wrong doors. It happens. He hadn't moved. I hadn't looked away. The woman in the waiting room behind him was watching us with open curiosity over the top of a chatelaine from 2022. "It's good to see you, Claire." I picked up the referral form from the floor where I'd dropped it, straightened it against the desk with both hands. "The walk-in is through the main entrance and then left," I said. "They close at 6. He nodded. He left. I sat very still for a moment after the door closed. Then I texted my sister, "You will not believe what just happened." She called me in 40 seconds. A record, even for her. "Tell me everything," my sister Renata said. I told her everything. "How did he look?" she asked, in the exact tone that made clear this was the real question. "It doesn't matter how he looked. Claire, tall," I said. "He looked tall and like he'd been somewhere expensive for a long time." "Oh no. It's fine. Is it?" I was in the clinic bathroom. I had 3 minutes before my lunch break ended. "It is completely fine. He went to the wrong floor. He'll go to a walk-in somewhere else next time, or get a GP, and that will be that." He moved back to Kitchener, temporarily, for 6 months. "Maybe more," I said, and then immediately wished I hadn't remembered that. He came back the next week, not to the walk-in, to our floor. He had apparently, in the intervening days, registered as a patient with one of the doctors in our practice. Dr. Pham, specifically, who was the only one with availability. And so now he was here for an actual appointment, with an actual file that I was now responsible for maintaining, and I had to type his date of birth into the system with my own hands. October 14th. I already knew his birthday. I processed his intake forms and handed him the clipboard and told him to take a seat and said, Dr. Pham would be with him shortly, and I said all of this in a completely normal voice while the woman I had been at 22 tried very hard to cause a scene from somewhere deep inside my chest. He sat down. He looked at the carpet. "Interesting pattern," he said, sort of to himself. "It's supposed to be calming," I said, before I could stop myself. He looked up and half smiled, and there it was, the thing I'd actually been afraid of. Not the shock of seeing him. The smile, which was the same as it had always been. A little crooked. Like he found the world mostly funny, and was willing to let you in on the joke. I looked back at my screen. He was called in 10 minutes later. When he came out, I was on a call and couldn't acknowledge him. He stood at the desk for a moment, and I held up one finger without looking at him. Just a moment, and when I finally wrapped up the call and turned, he was still there. "She wants to see me again in 3 weeks," he said, "to follow up." I pulled up the calendar. "November 6th work for you?" "Yes." I booked it. Gave him the appointment card. Our fingers didn't touch when I handed it to him, but it was a near thing, and I was aware of it, and I was annoyed that I was aware of it. "Thank you," he said. And then, quieter, "I heard you're raising a daughter." I went still. "Kitchener's small," he said. He wasn't being cruel. He was just saying a true thing. "I ran into your cousin at the Sobeys on Ottawa Street." "She's 8, I said. "Her name is Juniper." "That's a great name." "It is." He nodded once and left, and I spent the rest of the afternoon being incredibly productive and not thinking about him at all, which is to say I retyped the same referral letter 4 times and left my lunch in the microwave until it was fossilized. The third time he came in wasn't an appointment. It was a Tuesday in early November, 5:15, just as I was shutting down my station. The clinic was essentially empty. Last patient had left at 5. Dr. Pham was finishing notes in her office. I was putting on my coat when the door opened, and there he was. "We're done for the day," I said. "I know." He was carrying 2 cups from the coffee place on the corner. The good one, not the Tim's. I just wanted to, I don't know, talk, if that's okay. I looked at the cups. I looked at him. "That's a manipulation tactic," I said. "It's a flat white," he said, "and an oat milk latte, because I couldn't remember which you preferred. And your cousin said you'd gone off dairy, but she wasn't sure when." It had been 3 years since I'd gone off dairy, that he'd asked my cousin, and then stood in line and chosen wrong but tried. I don't know why it hit me the way it did. Maybe because it had been a very long time since someone had noticed a small thing about me and tried to get it right. Even imperfectly. I took the oat milk latte. We sat in the waiting room, the 2 of us, in the carpet-patterned chairs, in the fluorescent quiet of a closed medical clinic in Kitchener, Ontario. And he told me what had happened. Singapore had been everything they'd promised, until it wasn't. The company had run into regulatory problems. He was vague about it, and I didn't push. And he'd spent 6 years doing high-level consulting work that had taken him through 4 countries and paid him extraordinarily well and left him, at 32, with a very detailed understanding of his own appetite for this kind of life, which had turned out, quietly, over time, to be much smaller than he'd imagined at 24. "I thought I was a person who wanted to build things at scale," he said, "infrastructure projects, policy-adjacent stuff. And I do. I still do. But I thought that was everything, the whole answer, and it wasn't, and it wasn't." He turned the cup in his hands. "I came back because my dad's not well, and because I wanted to see if, I don't know how to say this without it sounding like a line. Try," I said. "I wanted to see if I'd made a mistake." The fluorescent light above us flickered once and steadied. "Everett," I said carefully, "you left. You stopped calling. You let it end without saying it was ending. I know, and I rebuilt my whole life, in a completely different direction. I know that too. I have a daughter. I know. She is my priority. She is my entire priority, above everything else. Anyone who comes into my life comes into hers. Do you understand what I mean?" "That's not a small thing." He looked at me for a long moment. "I understand." "I don't think you do," I said, and I wasn't being harsh, just honest. "I think you understand it conceptually, but you've been moving between countries for 8 years. You said this is temporary. 6 months, maybe more. That's not, I can't do maybe with a kid, do you understand? I can't introduce uncertainty into her life because I have feelings I haven't dealt with yet." Something shifted in his face. Not defensiveness, something quieter. "That's fair," he said. "It is." We sat with that for a minute. "I'm not asking for anything," he said finally. "I just needed you to know I came back partly because of what I walked away from. I'm not expecting that to mean anything to you. I just needed to say it." I looked at the face-down hydro bill, except there was no hydro bill here, just the carpet with the casino pattern and the cup going warm in my hands. "I have to pick up Junie from my mom's by 6, I said. He stood up immediately, the way men do when they're trying to show you they know when to stop. "Of course." I'll let you go." He threw away both cups, held the door for me. We rode the elevator down in silence that wasn't entirely uncomfortable, which was somehow worse, somehow reverse. In the parking lot, I stopped. "She asked me about her father last month," I said. "I don't know why I told him. She's 8. She's starting to ask the real questions. Where he went, why he doesn't call." I paused. She's very steady about it, which is either a good sign or a sign that I should find her a therapist. Everett was quiet. "Anyway," I said, "I'm not telling you that for any particular reason." "Okay," he said. But we both knew that wasn't quite true. November is a particular kind of month in southern Ontario. It's not the dramatic cold of January, not the pretty bleakness of late February. It's just gray and relentless, the kind of month that wears you down by refusing to be anything at all. I drove Junie to school and worked my hours and called my mom on her birthday and paid the hydro bill and tried not to think about the man who now had an appointment card for November 6th sitting somewhere in his expensive coat pocket. He showed for the appointment. Of course he did. He also left a gift card on the desk when he checked in. The same coffee shop, $50. With a note that said for the staff in handwriting that was exactly the same as I remembered. I put it in the communal drawer and told myself that was the appropriate thing to do with something addressed to the whole staff. He was in with Dr. Pham for 20 minutes. When he came out, I had my professional expression in place. "Everything okay?" I said, meaning medically. "She thinks it's stress-related," he said. "Imagine that. Very common," I said. "She suggested I find something that keeps me connected to the community. Volunteering. A recreational league. Apparently I am unmoored," her word. Dr. Pham is direct. I appreciated it. He looked at the carpet. "Is there a hockey rink nearby? An adult recreational league or something?" "I played at Waterloo." "I remember," I said, and then closed my mouth because I hadn't meant to say that. He looked up. I started typing something that didn't need to be typed. "There's a rink on Ira Needles," I said. "They have a Tuesday league, I think. You'd have to check the city site." "Okay." He didn't move. "Junie, is she in any activities?" I looked up from my fake typing. "She does swimming lessons Saturday mornings," I said slowly. "And she's been asking about skating." He nodded, like I'd said something important. Maybe I had. "See you in 3 weeks," he said. I pulled up the calendar. November 27th. He took the appointment card. This time, when I handed it to him, our fingers did touch. Just briefly. Just for a second. I noticed. I suspected he did too. My sister Renata came for dinner that weekend. She brought wine and unsolicited opinions in equal measure, which is what she always does, and I love her for both. We ate pasta after Junie went to bed, and I told her about the flat white, and the oat milk latte, and the gift card, and the appointment card, and the fingers, and she listened to all of it with the focused attention she normally reserved for closing arguments. "So," she said. "So," I said. "What are you going to do?" "Nothing," I said. "He's here temporarily. He doesn't know what unmoored means, which is actually what worries me, not the being unmoored itself. He's the kind of person who runs towards something big and doesn't think about what he's running away from. He did it at 24. I have no evidence he's different now." "People change," Renata said. "Renata, you're allowed to let someone try. I have a child." "Claire, Junie is not a reason to close yourself off from everything. She is a reason to be careful. Those are different things." I refilled my glass. Outside, the November rain was coming down sideways, tapping against the kitchen window, and the house was warm and small and mine. "He said he came back partly because of me," I said. "I know you told me, and I don't know if I believe him. Not because I think he's lying. I think he believes it. I just don't know if believing something and being ready for it are the same." Renata was quiet for a moment. "What would ready look like?" I thought about it. I thought about the way he'd remembered to ask about the dairy, and gotten it wrong by 3 years, and come anyway. I thought about Junie asking where her father had gone. Her voice perfectly even, her face perfectly still. The way children are still when they're holding something heavy and don't want you to know. "I don't know yet," I said, and that, for now, was the most honest thing I had. The last time I saw him in November was not at the clinic. It was a Saturday early, the week before his next appointment. Junie and I were at the Kinsman Aquatic Center for her swimming lesson. I was in the observation area with 15 other parents, All of us holding coffee, all of us watching our kids thrash enthusiastically through the water in a way that only vaguely resembled the technique being demonstrated. Junie was in the second lane. She had her red swim cap on. She'd insisted on the red one, rejected all others. And she was working on her backstroke with the particular expression she gets when she's concentrating hard, the one that looks faintly like she's solving a problem nobody asked her to solve. I was watching her when I heard someone say my name. I turned. Everett was standing 2 spots down along the railing, holding a coffee cup, looking at the pool, and then looking at me, and then looking at the pool again. "My neighbor's kid," he said, by way of explanation. He gestured toward a small boy enthusiastically cannonballing, where he absolutely should not have been cannonballing. I offered to bring him because she has a newborn and is running on about 40 minutes of sleep. "That's kind of you," I said. "I'm a little bit trying to be more rooted," he said. "I remember. We watched the pool. Junie's instructor corrected her arm angle and she adjusted immediately, and I felt the small, fierce pride of watching your kid absorb a correction without sulking. "Which one is yours?" he asked. "Red cap. Second lane." He found her. Watched for a moment. "She looks focused. She's always focused. It's slightly unnerving. She gets it from my mother." He smiled. "The real one. The crooked one." We stood there for the rest of the lesson. We didn't talk much. There wasn't, somehow, a lot that needed to be said just then. With the chlorine smell and the shouting kids, and the rain coming down outside the high windows. It was just 2 people standing at a railing, and it was ordinary, and it was not ordinary at all. When the lesson ended, Junie climbed out of the pool and spotted me immediately, the way kids do, like they have a radar for you specifically, and she came running over with her towel trailing behind her, and her red cap pushed halfway up her head. She stopped when she saw I was talking to someone. "Junie," I said, This is someone I knew a long time ago. His name is Everett." She looked at him with the frank evaluating stare of an 8-year-old. "Hi," she said. "Hi," he said. "Good backstroke." She considered this. "My arms aren't straight enough yet." They were pretty straight from here. "Coach Danielle says I drop my left elbow. Then work on the left elbow," he said. But the right one looked great. She seemed to accept this. She looked at me with an expression I recognized, the one that meant she was filing something away. On the way home, she was quiet for a few blocks. Then she said, "He seemed nice." "He is," I said. "He was, anyway. He might still be." She thought about this with the seriousness she brought to most things. "Are you friends?" "We were," I said. "We're figuring out what we are now." She nodded, like that made complete sense to her. "That happens," she said. And I looked at her in the rearview mirror, my 8-year-old with the damp hair, and the red swim cap still pushed up on her head, so steady, so serious, so much more at peace with uncertainty than I was, and I felt something loosen in my chest. Just slightly, just enough. I didn't know yet what Everett Calloway was to me now, or what he might become, or whether I was the kind of brave I'd need to be to find out. What I knew was that my daughter had looked at a stranger and called him nice, and that she'd done it in the same easy voice she used when she trusted something to be what it appeared to be. She'd gotten that from somewhere. I was starting to think it might have been from me.